Yo guys, what's going on? So today's video we're going to be talking about why 95% of personal development strategies are bullshit and the only two things you really need to facilitate a massive transformation in your life, because everything else that you learn is downstream from these two things. So I've been a personal development junkie for years. Since 2018, that was the year I made a very distinct decision to stop hating myself and live a life that I really, really love, that I'm really lit up by. And so I launched myself into personal development because I didn't know how else to change things. I started reading more books, I started watching YouTube videos, I started learning more, and it helped. Like, I definitely felt like I was absorbing more information, I was learning how to think critically, but it didn't really move the needle in a deep, meaningful way, nearly as much as taking action did. And now, the two things I talked about are not take action, because taking action is important, but there's also a flaw with that as well. The two things are attention and intention. So intention, if you do not have a true desire to change on a deep level, you won't. And attention, what you focus on grows. And so if you have a desire to change and you focus on living in a way that's going to get you better results, living in a way that's going to align with this new life you want, then you will find the things that will facilitate that deep level of change, right? For example, before I kind of talk about my story and what I went through, I know a lot of people who have gone to retreats, done breath work, done ayahuasca, done Vipassana retreats. Vipassana retreats are 10-day silent retreats. And their lives are no different, right? Like, they go, they find enlightenment, it's amazing, they're happy, they feel like they're a new person, but they don't actually integrate any of the lessons that they learned during these experiences in their actual life. They use these modalities as a way of escaping. They use these modalities as a way of mental masturbation, as, you know, a dopamine hit to feel better about themselves in the moment. You know, something I've learned is, while all these things are great, right? Like, I love retreats, I love breath work, I love all this stuff. But if there's no way to actually take what you've learned and bring it into your daily life, which can be messy at times, you know, you're trying to implement new habits, you're trying to learn new skills, you're trying to create a new way of living. You're not going to get it on the first go. You're going to screw up. There are going to be moments where you feel like you're falling back into old habits, and you have to try to get out of them. You have to remember the new life you want to live. You have to remember the new habits you want to actually carry over. You're going to stay the same if there's no way to integrate any of this, if there's no way of bringing it forward. Most of the work you're going to do in your life comes after the retreat. It comes in between the two retreats that you go to. It comes after doing ayahuasca. It comes after doing the breath work, because that's how your life is lived. Like, you can't just live this escapist dream of, you know, like, just bouncing from ayahuasca retreat to ayahuasca retreat. At some point, you have to come face to face with the things that trigger you. Because if you don't get triggered, if you don't have things that actually facilitate that emotional response, you don't have an opportunity to change on a deep level, right? It's like the same thing with lifting weights. You're tearing your muscles, really. That's all you're doing. If you don't tear your muscles, though, they don't have an opportunity to grow. They don't have an opportunity to get stronger. You won't gain any strength. So it's the same thing with your own internal life. If you don't put yourself in situations where you get to come face to face with your shadow, where you don't get to come face to face with those deep subconscious beliefs that you've held for such a long time and you didn't even realize were there, how are you going to rewire your brain? How are you going to reprogram who you are? I have a mentor of mine who told me that he knows people who went out to become monks and, you know, vows of celibacy, and they go away from society and they become enlightened. And then when they go back to regular society, or when they go back to North America or Europe or wherever it is they are, they can't control themselves. Like, they either develop a drinking problem or they have a sex addiction because they didn't work with the energy inside of them. There was no actual relation to what's going on. It was just a way to escape and to run away from it. I found that the greater my intention to change, like truly on a deep level, not just read more books and memorize more information to sound good at parties and impressive in conversations, that's when the modalities that worked for me appeared. That's, you know, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. When I was truly like, okay, I can't keep doing this, I'm ready to change. That's when I started getting into breath work, and I was able to make massive internal shifts. That's when I was able to do psychedelic journeys, and I was able to make massive shifts. That's when I was able to, you know, go to retreats and get massive returns from it, move across Canada, shut down my business, learn how to have fun. All these things came from my deep knowing of I'm ready to go deeper, and I'm ready to not continue to live this way over and over. I want to break these habits. And from that, okay, I have this deep intention. Now, okay, well, what am I going to focus on in order to choose differently? What am I going to focus on in order to get to the next level? What am I going to focus on in order to become the person I want to be? So my own personal journey, like I said, 2018, I decided I was going to turn things around and not live a life that I hated anymore. So I read a bunch, got a job at an agency. A couple of years after that, I moved to Toronto, got fired from that agency, was able to land on my feet and get another job with an agency remotely in Orlando. I lived in Toronto, went back to Orlando a bunch of times, back and forth. And then in 2023, I had a situation with a relationship I was in. It was very on and off. We were together for about a year and a half, but there were, breaks in between, and we broke up a couple times. And in one of the moments in which we were apart, I remember feeling so anxious and so shitty. And I didn't realize this at the time, but I had chosen a partner that reflected all the deep beliefs I had about myself. I spent a lot of time blaming this person. I spent a lot of time angry at this person. But that was a distraction. It took away from my process. It took away from me relating to what was going on in myself. It took away from my desire to live a better life. Because now, instead of focusing on me, and instead of focusing on creating, instead of focusing on how powerful I am and how I am truly the creator and the maker of my own reality, I was focusing on this other person. And I was passing the buck. I wasn't taking responsibility. I wasn't taking accountability. But when we were apart, I felt so much anxiety, and I felt just like things were constantly falling apart, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to get out of this. And so I made the deep intention to change. I found one of my mentors who I do breathwork with, who I've been working with ever since, and it's made an incredible difference in my life. And a year later, when things finally blew up, my body told me, right, like that it was time for me to stop doing this. I was very sick. I developed a lot of physical pain, and it was that pain that finally got me to realize, like, I can't keep living like this, and I can't keep outsourcing my responsibility to other people. Even though it appears like I'm doing well, I have a business, I'm, living abroad, I'm traveling a bunch, I was living in Toronto, and I thought that on the outside things looked good, but they weren't, because I hadn't addressed how I really saw myself. And of course, the process takes what it takes. Like, it's not an overnight thing. I needed that relationship, and I'm very grateful for it, because it taught me so much about myself, and it showed me, like, hey, this is where you're just going to keep running into this until you learn to go deeper. And that final break from that relationship is what led me to meditation and journaling. I thought that if I can't sit still with myself, if I don't know what's going on internally, how can I possibly create a life that I'm proud of? How can I possibly program myself differently if I'm not actually spending any time with the software, with the hardware that makes up my subconscious mind, right? I realized that every decision in my life was being driven by this deep feeling of unworthiness, this deep feeling like no matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, I wasn't worth it, that other people were above me. And I really, really hated myself. And through meditation and journaling and breath work and fasting and retreats and hypnotherapy and doing these with a deep intention to change, with a deep intention to actually create a relationship with what's going on inside of me. This isn't about like, I need to fix myself and, I'm a bad person and I need fixing and I need something to save me. No, this is about, I want to know what's going on and I want to sit with this. Right? Like, think about a relationship with somebody else. If you were dating somebody, if you're married to somebody, and they're telling you their problems and you're trying to constantly fix and you're constantly trying to make sure everything's good, it's exhausting to be around. But if you sit with them, if you're present with them, if you want to spend time with them and genuinely connect and build a relationship to what they're going through and who they are, that's when things become so much easier. And so when I learned how to do that with myself, things actually changed for the better. All of a sudden, when I'd meditate and journal and fast and sit in silence, all these memories from when I was a kid, teenager, young adult that were painful and I'd pushed away and just tried not to think about, just started bubbling up to the surface. It was really confusing for a while, but I realized that these were moments that were shaping the decisions I was making. And until I learned, like, what were my lessons from these moments? What did I take away from these instances that is currently driving my life now? I wouldn't be able to actually consciously rewire my mind. I wouldn't be able to consciously rewire my brain. create different patterns, create different habits. Because habits and patterns come from beliefs, and your beliefs come from your subconscious mind, right? When something happens to you and there's an emotional response and you don't actually process that emotion properly and you don't process it mentally as well, then it creates an imprint. And if you push it down, it gets stored in the body. And if you push it down, you just kick it to the back of your mind, where your mind goes, okay, I wasn't safe in that moment. I definitely want to protect myself. So I can't put myself in positions like that ever again. And it's very interesting to see how those impressions are extrapolated onto our lives later on, whether it's with business, with relationships, with money, with our family, etc. At the end of the day, your body wants to feel safe. And so many of us have become accustomed to feeling safe in situations that are chaotic because that's all we know. So of course we go to situations that are chaotic. Of course we go to relationships that are chaotic. Of course we attract business situations that are this roller coaster because it's what feels comfortable to us. It's what we're used to. Anyways, I'm getting away from my own story here, and I'll try to wrap it up as nicely as I can. But I'm on day 540 as of today's filming day 540 of meditating and journaling every day. And doing that was the best possible thing I could have possibly done, because doing that was, did I say that properly? I think I did. Anyways, you understand what I'm saying. Without learning how to sit still and observe what's going on in my mind, I realized I wouldn't be able to change it. I wouldn't be able to change my behavior. We live in a world that's constantly trying to fight for our attention. It's constantly trying to keep us distracted. And by doing that, we stray away from our true essence, and we stray away from how powerful we really are. So in order to reconnect with that power, in order to reconnect with our divinity, because we're children of God, you have to be able to sit still with it. One of my favorite quotes of all time is, all of man's problems stem from his inability to sit still in silence for 30 minutes. And it's so true. Until you do that and start to build a relationship to what's going on inside you, all these other things aren't going to move the needle for you. And it's a big reason why a lot of people seem unfulfilled. It's a big reason why a lot of people seem unhappy, because they're not carving out time to be with themselves. And it's difficult. It's not an easy thing to do. Like, there's so much shit that could come up. There's so much shit that we don't even realize we're running from that could scare the hell out of you. But until you make that deep intention and you start focusing on what it's going to take in order to get you to that goal, in order to get you to that life you want to live, it's just not going to happen. And for me, that starts with meditation. That starts with sitting in silence. That's the foundation that you can build everything off of. Manifestation work, energy work, aligning your frequency, all that stuff starts with your ability to sit in silence. The biggest problem with personal development is that it doesn't help you facilitate deep change by releasing emotions, by processing things you've went through. You're just adding information to your mind. And a big reason why a lot of people enter spiritual spaces and experience beautiful modalities like breath work, ayahuasca, retreats, fasting, etc., and don't get the results they seek is because there's no relation to the process. There's no intention. And from intention, you can focus your attention on the things that matter, right? Where attention goes, energy flows. Until you make a decision, okay, I'm deeply ready to do this. And now I'm going to focus on what it's going to take to build this relationship. It's not going to matter. The easier it is for you to sit in stillness, the easier it's going to be for you to understand what the next steps are on your journey. Your intuition is much sharper, your mind is much clearer, and it's just so much easier to move forward with confidence. That's what led me to ultimately leaving Canada and going to Thailand. That's what led me to ultimately move to Vancouver from Toronto over a year and a half ago. That's what led me to close my agency down earlier in May this year and fuck off across the world. And it didn't feel difficult because I've sat with myself for so long, because I've focused on creating a deep relationship with myself and understanding what's going on in my internal world. All these decisions were very natural. All these decisions were actually very easy, and they gave me confidence to do them and execute. If you're interested in doing things like breath work and going on retreats and fasting and hypnotherapy, I highly, highly recommend. Just remember that the shifts you wish to make and the progress that you wish to achieve depends completely on your ability to relate to what's going on inside you. Without a deep intention, and without the ability to focus your attention on that intention, nothing's going to change. Peace, guys. Talk later.